Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our special Super Tuesday episode. I'm Walton Gray Martin. With me tonight is Ryan Chandler, Bailey Wang, and Lily Bonin. Yesterday, Texas took part in a 14-state shootout to determine not only the Democratic presidential nominee, but a number of national, state, and local elections. And it was the first time since 2008 in which Texas was a major player in the Democratic primaries. As we did not disappoint this year. Former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Sanders remained neck and neck throughout the night, with Sanders taking an early but small lead. However, Biden ended up winning the state with 32% of the vote. This means he leaves specifically with 56 of Texas's 288 delegates, while Bernie came in second with 29% and 50 delegates. A look at the overall states, we see that, a look at the overall state, Bloomberg ended third and Warren ended fourth. And looking to the other 14 states, Biden took a clear lead. He won 9 states with a total of 453 delegates. In the end, however, Bernie finished with 382 delegates after winning only 3 states. 2 states are still too close to call, those being California for Bernie. And although the Democrats still do not have a clear candidate, the field has narrowed to 4, with Biden and Sanders being the clear leaders. Now, Bailey, let's just jump right into this. Let's start with you. Before we got Super Tuesday, there was a large discussion after, Buttigieg and Klobuchar drop out for Biden, whether or not Elizabeth Warren should drop out and support Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the fact that she didn't drop out, do you think that undercut his ability to gain voters and to gain traction?
Well, in the short answer, no. Well, let's start out. Last night was a very long and late night down to everything. Yeah. The Republican side, we're not surprised. Wouldn't it be interesting if we all came and we were like, oh my God, Mark Sanford won that.
Wow.
He was killing it. Yeah. But we see here at the last moment, everyone started to drop out and they were immediately like, Biden, that's who we want. Mm-hmm. Because they realized that they couldn't win. Klobuchar, Buttigieg, they see that Biden is their candidate to beat Trump, and we see that even Trump is saying that it was somehow a game against Bernie. And Bernie said that the political establishment, this is a quote, was coming together to stop him. Well, I guess we found the one thing that will bring the political establishment together is not Bernie. So we see this quick shift. So the question now is, when is Warren going to drop? When is Bloomberg going to drop? Because obviously we see it's down to 2 candidates, Biden, Bernie. There is very unlikely of any shift coming on. We already see that Trump spent a third of what Bloomberg has already spent on his campaign coming in. That Warren, she didn't even win Massachusetts. Yeah, but now it's down to, when are you going to drop out? Mm-hmm. When are you going to support someone else? And when is that someone else possibly going to give you some type of favor later, mm-hmm. or another seat going on?
Well, even John Kasich won his home state.
Yeah.
So we can't even compare it to John Kasich.
That's a little rough going into things. Talking about another candidate who didn't win a single state, Michael Bloomberg. Mm-hmm. Now, Michael Bloomberg, pretty much bought his way into this race, Ryan. Do you think, however, looking at the turnout from yesterday and who supported Michael Bloomberg, mm-hmm. do you think that Bloomberg is stealing votes away from Biden?
Well, yes, in the short term. But my favorite headline that I saw yesterday was Michael Bloomberg has spent over $550 million on ads all across every state. Mm-hmm. And he's considering dropping out after being on the ballot for 1 day. Yep. I think this is an important lesson, especially in the Democratic Party, that we are not a party that you can buy with big mm-hmm. money. This is a party where you need to be on the ground, talking to voters, getting small donations. Mm-hmm. And Bloomberg's strategy is not going to work. So I am looking forward to him using his organization and his pocketbook to support the nominee. He is not going to be it, though.
Yeah, I completely agree. Unless he does pull a rabbit out of a hat, he's not going to do much. Lily, moving on to you, and I kind of want to take a look at voter turnout. Yesterday in a lot of places, voter turnout was double of what it was in 2016 and 2018. Now, a lot of this had to do with the Democratic voter turnout. We saw a massive, in Texas, for instance, in almost all of the major districts, we had double the amount of Democrats out than it was in the midterms 2018. Do you think that when November comes around, confident that Republicans will turn out in the same numbers as Democrats have in the primaries?
So one really interesting set of numbers to look at for that question is I actually added this up this morning. If you look at the number of votes that each Democratic primary candidate received and add those all up, you still don't get the number of votes that Donald Trump received in his virtually uncontested primary, which I think says a lot because a lot of Republicans weren't super motivated to get out to vote because they're like, obviously Trump's going to win. Like, this isn't something super, super important. Like, that particular race was not super important for Republicans to vote in. And yet they still had higher turnout than Democrats did if you add all of them together. And I think that Republicans are only going to turn out, at least in Texas, more in the general election because then they're going to be actually opposing someone. And it'll be really interesting to see how Democrats react, how Biden supporters react if Bernie wins or Bernie supporters react if Biden wins. So I don't see things going well for Democratic turnout in Texas, honestly.
Well, and you bring up a good point. Although we like to focus on the record numbers, we have to remember these are just the primaries. That primaries are important for different parties. And you also bring up a good point. How do these parties, these candidates react going into the future? And I kind of want to open this up because I know Ryan's going to want to get on this too. But how do you think these candidates move forward, Biden and Bernie, on after Super Tuesday? Which no one was expecting this to happen.
It's not going to be. I think the Democratic Party is on a collision course that is going to create long-term damage within the party if it keeps on this course. The most likely scenario right now, I think, is Bernie. Well, after last night, I don't know, but the major prediction is Bernie goes in with a plurality of the delegates into the convention, and then he doesn't get it on the first ballot. Moves to second ballot. Biden takes all of those super delegates who support him, and he gets the nomination with those 500-plus super delegates who will vote for him, and Bernie supporters are going to raise hell. And maybe they should rightfully be mad, but that's the system that we've set up, and we have to stick to it. But it's just a question of whether Bernie supporters will rally behind the nominee.
And you bring up a very good point because there's a very good chance we won't have a candidate with the majority of the delegates. And you bring up a good point too. In that kind of an instance, Bernie supporters could easily split the ticket of what other candidate we have and easily allow Trump to win. So I want to ask y'all, if y'all had to choose a candidate right now for Trump to face, who would it be?
Well, I see there's a huge argument going on between, originally I was like, I think Biden is the one ticket that can beat Trump, and a lot of people are thinking that way. There are a lot of reverse arguments saying that Bernie would be a better ticket than Biden, just because moderation is boring when it comes down to it. This passion, this difference is romantic, and that's why Bernie appeals to so many young people, and that's why he seems fearless, even though he's around 80 years old.
Well, I think it's a lot of the same energy, like obviously completely different side of the spectrum, but it's very similar to, I think, the energy that got Trump in office. It's very, very grassroots, very, I don't want to say populist, because, but it's very, like, based around the people. It's very, it energizes the base. Like, I don't think Joe Biden is going to energize the base. He's not going to energize college students to get out, young people.
He doesn't have a party, really. Well, he doesn't know his group that's backing him. Bernie knows the group that's backing him. Bernie knows he's running for the president of the United States. Joe Biden thinks he's running for U.S. Senate.
Well,
and that it is Super Thursday, by the way. So I guess that's tomorrow. So I guess we're all wrong.
First of all, that quote he never actually said.
He doesn't know the Declaration of Independence, though.
Well, okay.
It's just like the campaign.
It got me.
It was like,
Should not have had this conversation.
I was like, well, give me more ammo.
He is colorful in his language a lot of the times, and sometimes he missteps.
I don't have Obama's support yet, though. Exactly. Obama has not endorsed anyone, and people are saying he's like, his representatives are saying people don't need it, saying people don't need it.
No, I think
it's very important.
He will endorse the nominee. He won't endorse until then, though, because he sticks with the party, which is what Biden is banking on. But to your larger point about Bernie bringing out more excitement, I think that is true in our community on a college campus. Of course, Bernie is very popular with the youth vote, but I think last night's Super Tuesday results proved that theory is a little wrong because, Biden has not spent or raised as much as Bernie. He doesn't have the organization in a lot of these states that Bernie has, and he still won by sheer vote count. This is not the establishment. Well,
at this point, that's
think about and that may be true, but you can't discount that. That is still really important.
I'm
and
not.
Bernie Sanders has almost universal name recognition too. He's been a primetime candidate for over.
And to argue on the other side, some people like
now.
moderation.
Yeah.
Other than this passion.
I mean, like,
I would say more people. Saying earlier is like, yeah, Bernie's going to excite the young people to get out to vote, but the youth vote last night nationally was actually at its lowest in the past couple of elections.
Yeah, well,
13%. We can't rely on that too much.
We're not seeing that massive wave that Bernie really wanted, that he was expecting.
Exactly.
And maybe people are, siding with Biden's results over a revolution. But that's all we really have time to continue our discussion for the president. Don't worry, we won't be done with Super Tuesday. We'll be right back with a discussion on coronavirus and UT sexual misconduct policy. But first, an update on our state primaries.
Welcome back to Tower Talks. The presidential election was not the only thing on voters' minds as they cast their ballots yesterday. Many important state primaries were taking place for both parties. For the most part, incumbents were able to hold onto their seats. However, in the Republican race for the railroad commissioner, incumbent Ryan Sitton lost to his opponent, Jim Wright, by close to 300,000 votes. This was the most noticeable incumbent to lose their seat during the primary election. Well, let's start with you. Do you think this will help or hurt the Democrats in 2020?
Well, I think it honestly might end up hurting the Democrats, and it's because nothing really happened that wasn't supposed to happen. And Bailey's looking like exactly.
I'm like, this is a boring block.
Yeah, like
we all assumed incumbents happen.
Exactly. and I mean, what Democrats can hope for, and we're not going to obviously see this until November 2020, is the best case scenario is that they can take back the House, the state House. They're not going to take back the state Senate. It's just not going to happen. And if they take back the state House, then that allows for them to have an upper hand with the whole redistricting process in 2021. And without that, who knows whether or not Texas can ever become blue. So I think the amount of Democratic turnout that we saw is a win for the Democrats, yes, but there's no clear victory for either party because that's going to be coming in November.
Yeah, and there were some interesting primary results in the Democratic side. One thing that I thought was particularly noticeable was Jessica Cisneros, who had been endorsed by a lot of the more progressive wing of Congress in D.C., like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, had lost her race to the more moderate opponent. So we've sort of been following the race for the Democratic primary for Roger Williams' seat.
Yep.
Ryan, what do you think about the race between Heidi Sloan and Julie Oliver? I think it's going to run off, right?
No,
or is it not?
No,
Okay.
that was an interesting one. That was a fun one to watch because we had both of those candidates on Tower Talks recently, and the energy behind Heidi Sloan and Julie Oliver on campus was huge among students. In the end, Julie Oliver won with 67% of the vote. She won handily over Heidi Sloan, so it's not going to a runoff. And I don't think that's surprising, right? Julie Oliver has great name recognition. She ran before in 2018, so that definitely helped her. But congratulations to her, and I'm glad that we were able to get her on the show to help that.
A really interesting race to follow in the general election. Bailey, was there anything interesting in the Republican primary side? Any sort of trends in terms of who was sort of winning primaries, and how do you think it's going to translate to general?
Well, it was like we said earlier, it was all assumed. Mostly incumbents took everything in the House, and the one was the Railroad Commissioner, where the incumbent did not win his spot again.
So weird.
I know. Odd.
Who's heard of him?
I know. But the two districts we did see that were close races to keep an eye on were District 11, where it was August Pfluger, who he won, because that was just incumbent had left, it was an open seat there, and he was the one who was endorsed by Trump, who's leading in that. And we also see in District 12, which is my area a little bit more, up north in Dallas-Fort Worth area, that Kay Granger had a really close race.
Yeah,
and that usually doesn't happen. I mean, she still took it, but it was very, very close. But still, like I said earlier, it's nothing really out of the blue where we were like, oh, wow, like all the incumbents didn't win. It was kind of what we were predicting in the first place.
Yeah, one trend that I saw like throughout the state, and we were sort of looking at as the results were coming in, was it seemed like a lot of the more conservative endorsed challengers, whether it was for open seats or Kate Granger's race, they tended to be losing overall in the state, which is really, really interesting. So any sort of final thoughts on do you think there's any Republicans that have been nominated that will be able to lose to a Democrat?
Well,
taking back the House.
So we say this is a pretty boring, primary. Incumbents mostly won, but my jaw dropped at two races last night. The first one is a local to us. Robert Morrow is running for the State Board of Education race.
That was crazy.
And if you know him, you understand how it's crazy that he got 39% of the vote. He's going to a runoff in that race. His official platform includes teaching high school boys how to use an AR-15 and mandating that all schools offer an elective for high school girls to learn twerking and pole dancing. He's a conspiracy theorist who believes LBJ killed JFK, that both Bushes were serial killers. I mean, he is a satirical candidate, but it's also kind of serious because he has won elections in the past.
I don't think he's actually kidding either.
So I sat down with him for 2 hours last week to interview him. And he is a character. But just the fact that he got so many votes shocked me.
I'm so scared. I'm so scared, but like so entertained at the same time.
Yes, exactly. We're
like
in politics for the entertainment value.
Yeah. So we definitely do have a lot of runoffs to keep an eye on, and a lot of, especially state races, did go on to a runoff, but I guess we'll see how those turn out in a couple months. We'll be right back with the discussion on UT sexual misconduct policy, but first a look at the coronavirus.
Worries over the coronavirus are the highest yet, with dozens of new cases arising in the United States this week. So far, 9 Americans have died after coming down with the novel respiratory disease that originated in China last December. The virus has killed over 3,000 people worldwide and infected more than 93,000. Here in Texas, 11 people are known to be infected, and all are in quarantine in San Antonio. The University of Texas has taken all precautions to protect students from the virus, suspending non-essential student travel to affected areas, including all of China and Iran. Austin Public Health has found no evidence of the virus spreading around Travis County and says the risk of contracting it here is low. So this has been a story that has demanded all of our attention recently. Whether that media attention is warranted here in the United States is up for debate because it's very sensationalized. A lot of people have fears over this. But Walton, let's start with you. Are those fears warranted, or can we chill for the time being?
You know, I think we can chill for the time being. When we look at corona, it's, yes, a little bit, it is more severe than our common, flu, but it's harder to get this disease, this virus. And so I think people do need to chill a little bit. And it reminds me a lot of the swine flu kind of scare that we had back when we were younger. I had the swine flu and I didn't die. And I remember, and it's kind of the same rhetoric, and I know coronavirus is a little bit more severe and serious than swine flu, but it's kind of the same rhetoric that people with compromised immune systems, people who are elderly, they're the ones who are most at risk. So no, I don't think that this is such a big deal. And in areas like, for instance, Manhattan, they've said, yes, we're going to encounter these viruses. It's just a part of life, but we don't have to all freak out about it. And I think that's the key point. We don't need to cancel South by. We don't need to do all of this stuff just because of a disease that's going around.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah. It's important.
Yes.
So Lily, what has been the approach from the United States to this, and what should we be doing about this virus?
Yeah, so obviously one of the first things that they're going to try and do is sort of try and create a vaccine. But one of the most visible reactions I've seen has actually been from the Fed, because whether or not it ends up being a mass pandemic in terms of fatalities, I think that we're already seeing the effects that this is going to have on the stock market. We've been seeing that for probably the past week now, and that's only getting worse. The Fed has been cutting interest rates, I think, a couple of times now. And that's something that's not going to get better. We've already seen a lot of price gouging for things like hand sanitizer, face masks, like pretty extreme price gouging. And that's something that not only is going to happen whether there's mass fatalities or not, but it's already happening. And I think that is more what the United States is preparing for than, obviously putting funding towards the CDC. I think Trump's requested something like $2 billion in additional funding to fight the coronavirus. That's being held up in Congress right now. But I think the main thing they're focusing on is just controlling the chaos that's sort of already happening.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, there have been varied reactions to the federal response on this. Some Democrats are wanting more. Republicans say we're doing all we can. Bailey, what are your concerns about this?
Well, I'm going to build off of what both of them just said and go from, have you ever had mono? I know it's different, but still at the same time, mono, people are out of school, out of work for months with mono. That's a pretty bad disease too going on. I feel like people are freaking out. 80% of the cases are mild cases. The people who died in Washington, like you said, Walton, died because they already had compromised immune systems. They were old and they couldn't handle it. That's what's going on. And people are freaking out more and more. They're buying face masks. And it's the less we know, the more we're repeating. The more we're repeating what we do know, and it's just freaking people out.
Exactly.
So what the president is trying to do is keep people calm. And what both sides have said, but might have not necessarily acted upon, is that this is not a political issue at all. So I think the U.S. is handling this very well. I can't say the same for most countries like Iran or China going on, but I mean, if you want to talk about it politically, you want to see what the White House has done. The White House has already started a coronavirus task force in the last month. President has temporarily suspended entry to the U.S. from any foreign nationals. And then you see Democrats going on the other side and criticizing the president a little bit more, criticizing these health professionals, saying he needs to request more money, Pelosi especially, when Pelosi can get that funding herself and start that herself. So if you say you don't want to make it political, you're immediately making it political there by blaming someone.
And I know we can all rest easy knowing that the nation's greatest scientific mind, Mike Pence, is leading this charge.
I know that his knowledge Pelosi and
of
Dr.
biology.
Sherman.
I mean, none of them are doctors. Someone has to take leadership on it. There is a policy side of this to be addressed by politicians.
Yes, absolutely. And you know who is on the task force? Ben Carson, the neurosurgeon, also the Housing and Urban Development Secretary.
Sounds like a great combination.
But hey,
Well,
yes, Walton.
Bringing it back to a little bit more local, I know I kind of touched on this, but one thing that I think is kind of being overblown, like we said, I do think people are freaking out, but the amount of organizations that are leaving South by, it's 2 weeks away now, or 3 weeks away, and multiple very large companies have already left South by because they're afraid that South by is just going to be overrun with coronavirus, like Facebook has left.
Like it's the plague.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is, even if it was overrun with coronavirus, we wouldn't actually know because it takes 2 weeks before any symptoms start to occur. So we won't even know if South by is taken over by the coronavirus.
I don't know if that's a better or worse thing, but good to know.
Either way, I guess.
It's just confusing to me. I don't think sponsors should leave South by. And there's even a petition that has come out to end South by because of the coronavirus.
Hey, I heard flight prices are awesome right now, though. So
Yes.
We
we're all
could book
looking
a
to go
cheap
to
hotel.
Italy.
I mean, if
Yeah, we could see JC.
I feel like it sort of makes sense. I mean, if they're already going to look at canceling something like the Olympics, then South
That
by
is
certainly
true.
is less.
Yeah, level down. That is
So-
true.
How's JC? Wait, I didn't think about that.
Call
JC, are you okay? If you see this, let us know
Let's go,
that you're
JC.
fine.
Send a letter.
And there have been a few study abroad programs that have been disrupted because of this.
That's
Oh,
right.
some people have been sent
I hope
home. I've
JC,
heard they
you're okay.
woke them up in the middle of the night.
Oh,
like,
my
you need
gosh.
to leave, and it's like that's a
That's a little
much.
And that
I
creates
mean,
panic.
Yeah, that
by
does.
doing that.
It's like
Yeah. And I mean, we're very lucky to be here in the United States with the fortune to be able to fend this off. There are other countries that are getting it much worse. But yeah, we'll continue monitoring it and see how it develops. But coming up, after months of protests and student advocacy, the administration released new policies regarding sexual misconduct. We'll delve into those next.
Reopen. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to Tower Talks. On Monday morning, UT President Greg Fenves sent out a statement to students about the changes made to UT's sexual misconduct policy. Fenves said for the past 4 months, consultants from Hush Blackwell firm had been meeting with UT students, staff, and faculty to fully address any concerns. The outcome came with 3 new policies. Fenves stated, UT will streamline the resources we offer to survivors to support them effectively. If any UT faculty or staff member is found after a thorough investigation to have committed sexual assault, sexual harassment, stalking, or interpersonal violence, the presumptive punishment will be termination. If there is a case in which a UT employee is found to have engaged in one of these 4 types of misconduct and is not terminated because of mitigating factors, that information will be compiled and made publicly available while preserving the privacy of survivors. In addition to this, the Travis County District Court judge ruled last week that the public has a right to see disciplinary records of UT students accused of sex crimes. This comes into light from athletes having the opportunity to transfer to NCAA schools despite being disciplined for their sexual offense at another college. When the Austin American-Statesman asked the university for records of disciplinary hearing rulings dating back since 2014, UT withheld that information. It is now put into light that UT violated a basic tenet of the Texas Public Information Act by withholding this information and failing to consult the Attorney General's office. So we have a lot going on here. We see where the university has stood for the past few years on a lot of policies going on, but now we have these new revisions. So Ryan, let's start with you. Do you believe that these are going to help or impact in any way? Let's say not only what has happened, but do you think that people will be a little bit more cautious of how they hold themselves, especially faculty and staff?
Well, I would hope they would have done that beforehand. But yes, of
But
course,
obviously
these
haven't.
policy changes are a huge benefit to the student body and the community as a whole. I love this story because it all started with students sitting in President Fenvis's
Who we
office
interviewed.
demanding a change. Yes. It really is a great example of the power of student advocacy and the administration listening to the student voice when they have denied doing so for so long. So I'm really happy that we have these advocates on campus. It's been obviously a major issue all year, and especially in these student elections happening. Everybody is running on this issue, and it is good to know the students can make this change for the better. So congratulations to all of them.
And I know actually a lot of SG candidates got a lot of, I'd like to say they were challenged by their stances of sexual assault, knowing nothing about the topic at all, and especially some being men trying to be very consistent of that topic who have no experience of it at all. Also, we have this training that people have to undergo, which involves no sex jokes, anything that has to do with make people uncomfortable. I'd like to bring into light a giant anti-gun protest, blank, not Glocks. You can fill that in yourself, or you're welcome to look it up. Is not a thing anymore because that would violate the policy. So going on to another story, Walton, I want to bring up this scandal that happened last week with the Texas Public Information Act. So basically what happened is UT withheld all these records because they either wanted or to transfer these NCAA students to go wherever they wanted to go, and the Austin Statesman wanted these records and they completely denied them. They also failed to consult the Attorney General's office. So what is your take on this? Why did UT do that? Did they not clearly see that that is violating the First Amendment and the public's right to know?
You know, Bailey, when I think about this case, the University of Texas is a massive university, and they deal with hundreds of public information requests, probably a day. So the one word that comes to my mind when I hear this is stupid, because that's what it is. This is stupid. They know how the law works. Basically, you have 10 days as an institution to decide whether or not, once that request is made, to decide whether or not you're going to involve the Attorney General. They not only didn't do that, they just said, screw it. We're not even going to involve the Attorney General at all. We're just not going to give them these documents. So not only were they caught with their cookie with their hand in the cookie jar, with their hand in the cookie jar, but then it's like a little kid running around the house trying to hide the cookie jar too. It's just, it's stupid and childish. What the University of Texas should have done is they should have owned up to these statistics, to this data, and said, hey, here's the problems that we are suffering and that we're dealing with as a campus. Here's the things that we're putting in place. Instead of they said, we're not even going to give you this information and we're going to break the law doing it. I mean,
I don't think there's one student either, or that athlete that is that good that you could have the possibility of being sued for it.
Even if they were worried about privacy concerns, I don't know, maybe that's a valid thing. They don't want to be sued by these students. Okay, then you go to the Attorney General's office and say, like, hey, we're worried about this. What can we do? You don't try and hide it.
Exactly.
Like, there were options that they were worried about other issues.
And that's the point of the Attorney General, or a state agency, pretty much. You're a state institution. The Attorney General there's for you.
Now, Lily, there was some comeback with this, saying that there is some privacy that these students need. Where do you believe that plays in this ruling, between that and the public's right to know who has been disciplined or who has been ruled to have committed a sexual offense?
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what all falls under the Public Information Act. I do know it is a lot harder to get information than
there's like over 60
the basic
sections.
reading of the act would make it seem. I've tried to request information from the university as well, and they will cite some pretty obscure parts of this act or interpretations of it even to get out of having to do that. So they are looking for any and every opportunity to not give you information.
Exactly.
Which is a broader issue than just if they're worried about students' privacy. But like I was saying earlier, I do think there are legitimate privacy issues there because it is just students who were accused, not even once you have an ongoing investigation or were found guilty, which is certainly a different level. But again, if they were really worried about that, we have the state AG's office. You go there and you ask them, and the AG's office is going to be, they're going to be on the side of what is best following the law and like what is the most accurate following of it.
Exactly.
So they had options. I do think that is a very legitimate concern. I know they're also worried about that with professors who are accused as well, because then you come into employment law issues, and so you don't ever want to be releasing private information of those who are simply accused. Not to understate that, but it is just an accusation. But again, they had options.
Yes, and there's
which
very
is what's the most important there.
And there's a very thin line, but when it comes to following the process, especially dealing with information like that, you have to go through the full process and you have to get that opinion.
Well,
So,
also, it's the awesome American statesman. Like, did they think that they could just not, like,
I know.
say anything,
Just-
get away with
and
it?
then
Like,
it's gone.
It's literally, they are the news agency. Like, they can report on it themselves.
Exactly.
So,
well, that's where we're going to have to leave it. We hopefully can see some positive changes coming into place after last week and this week with new sexual misconduct revisions and policies being overturned. So we will be right back with this week's Last Word. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. It's time for today's last word. Let's just make it real easy. Bailey, we'll start with you.
All right, so I guess this is the official announcement that we are now a bi-weekly show, just due to the amount of growing up and other working and LSAT and other things we have to do. It's totally overrated and not fun at all. But
Don't do it.
I'm going to share what I'm doing next week instead of being here on this Wednesday. Next week, I'm going to be at the Freedom of Information Foundation board meeting discussing my research that I've done on a certain transparency bill that deals with third parties and everything going on. This definitely shows you that the freedom of speech and also the public's right to know is not partisan at all, especially if I'm there too. And especially the bill that I'm working on was drafted by both somewhat Democrat and a Republican coming together and just wanting to know where government spending's going on and see if this bill that's overturned a few things is actually going into place. It's not. I can give you a highlighted thought of that. We've discovered some stuff, but yeah, so that's what will be next week. And that's what I do in my free time when I'm not on Tower Talks, is research the First Amendment laws. Oh, also, I bake. And so we made you brownies. We made you brownies, and I have them after this. So,
Oh.
I'm sure you'll all enjoy the brownies that you could eat.
I know, he put them in the oven with his little pawsies.
Wow.
He was just like, he closed it. I'm like, how did you do that? Like a foot tall. But yeah.
Well, then we'll jump over to you.
So I wanted to mention our YCT meeting that we're having this week. I thought it'd be especially interesting for anyone who is a journalism major. We're having former state senator and founder of the Texan News, Connie Burton, coming to speak, which if you're interested in what conservative media is like in Texas in general, that'd be really interesting, or how to start your own publication and what it's like running one. I thought that would be especially relevant to mention to all of y'all. If y'all want to come. But yeah, that'll be really interesting. It's going to be next week at 6 o'clock in the Mez's basement. So, yeah.
I'll be there.
Media.
I don't think I'm invited.
Nice basement.
You're always welcome.
I don't think so.
Well, Ryan, I know you've had an exciting weekend, so what's your last word?
Yes, so we're talking about all of this election news, who's going to D.C. I had a really cool opportunity to see it up close and personal with about 25 other UT students who made the trip to D.C. for the weekend to learn about a bunch of policy issues going on, to educate ourselves on the national stage. And while we were there, we were walking around the Capitol, and I see this woman with a dog walking down the hall, and I was like, oh, that's a cute dog. And I look up, and it's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So we stopped and talked to her for a little bit. She was very nice. But it was bipartisan. We also met with Dan Crenshaw, John Cornyn, and Ted Cruz to talk about their policy stances regarding American-Israel relationships. So, it was a great opportunity to meet some of the people we talk about a lot on the show.
some reason
And they were all very nice.
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm happier when you don't have a last word. Okay.
Well,
next person,
You'll
so
get
I
that
don't
back.
say something
You'll get
like
that back next time.
Well, to avoid any greater conflict in the two of you, I want to just kind of take a second and give just the people of Super Tuesday and just voters so far, kind of just a round of applause. I know when we talk about elections, it's always very stressful. It's who's going to win, who's going to take over, leading our country and leading some of the most important roles that we have. But I'm just really impressed with the voter turnout that we had yesterday and in past primaries. So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't stop. The only thing that we have is our vote. That is the most important thing. So get out and vote in November.
Is
get out and be.
A call to public action?
You're strongly encouraged to vote.
If you want to vote,
He would really like
you
it.
should
It would make me happy.
can vote
Yes.
Enjoy.
at the FSA, the PCL, and Texas Hall.
Look, just it's a good thing to do. That's all I'm saying. Well, I know this will not be our last time talking about election news, and will not be our last time talking about.
It's going to be a really fun time.
Yeah, it will be. But thank you for joining us tonight. Never miss an episode of Tower Talks. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Tower Talks TSTV for full episodes and more. Texas News Channel is back Monday night at 9 p.m. Don't miss it. For Ryan, Lily, Bailey, and myself, Walton Gray, we'll be back, actually not next week, but in two weeks. So we'll see you back there on that Wednesday right after spring break. Have a great night.